Chapter 1. The Coming of the Patriarchs from Abraham to Jacob in the Fertile Crescent. If we draw a line from Egypt through the Mediterranean lands of Palestine and Syria, then following the Tigris and Euphrates through Mesopotamia to the Persian Gulf, the result is an unmistakable crescent. 4,000 years ago, this mighty semicircle around the Arabian desert, which is called the Fertile Crescent, embraced a multiplicity of civilizations lying side by side like a lustrous string of pearls. Rays of light streamed out from them into the surrounding darkness of mankind. Here lay the center of civilization from the Stone Age right up to the Golden Age of the Greco-Roman culture. About 2000 BC, the further we look beyond the Fertile Crescent, the deeper grows the darkness and signs of civilization and culture decrease. It is as if the people of the other continents were like children awaiting their awakening. Over the eastern Mediterranean, already a light is shining. It is the heyday of the Minoan kings of Crete, founders of the first sea power known to history. For 1,000 years, the fortress of Mycenae had protected its citizens, and a second Troy had long been standing from the ruins of the first. In the nearby Balkans, however, the early Bronze Age had just begun. In Sardinia and western France, the dead were being buried in vast stone tombs. These megalithic graves are the last great manifestation of the Stone Age. In Britain, they were building the most famous sanctuary of the Megalithic Age, the Temple of the Sun at Stonehenge, that giant circle of stones near Salisbury, which is still one of the sights of England about which many tales are told. In Germany, they were tilling the soil with wooden plows. At the foot of the Himalayas, the flickering lamp of an isolated outpost of civilization in the Indus Valley was fast going out. Over China, over the vast steppes of Russia, over Africa, darkness reigned supreme. And beyond the waters of the Atlantic lay the Americas in twilight gloom. But in the Fertile Crescent, and in Egypt, on the other hand, cultured and highly developed civilizations jostled each other in colorful and bewildering array. For 1,000 years, the pharaohs had sat upon the throne. About 2000 BC, it was occupied by the founder of the 12th dynasty, Amenemhat I. His sphere of influence ranged from Nubia, south of the Second Cataract of the Nile, beyond the Sinai Peninsula to Canaan and Syria, a stretch of territory as big as Norway. Along the Mediterranean coast lay the wealthy seaports of the Phoenicians. In Asia Minor, in the heart of present-day Turkey, the powerful kingdom of the ancient Hittites stood on the threshold of its history. In Mesopotamia, between Tigris and Euphrates, reigned the kings of Sumer and Akkad, who held in tribute all the smaller kingdoms from the Persian Gulf to the sources of the Euphrates. Egypt's mighty pyramids and Mesopotamia's massive temples had for centuries watched the busy life around them. For 2,000 years, farms and plantations as big as any large modern concern had been exporting corn, vegetables, and choice fruits from the artificially irrigated valleys of the Nile, the Euphrates, and the Tigris. Everywhere throughout the Fertile Crescent and in the empire of the pharaohs, the art of cuneiform and hieroglyphic writing was commonly known. Poets, court officials, and civil servants practiced it. For commerce, it had long been a necessity. The endless traffic in commodities of all sorts, which the great import and export firms of Mesopotamia and Egypt dispatched by caravan routes or by sea from the Persian Gulf to Syria and Asia Minor, from the Nile to Cyprus and Crete, and as far as the Black Sea, is reflected in their business correspondence, which they conducted on clay tablets or papyrus. Out of all the rich variety of costly wares, the most keenly sought after were copper from the Egyptian mines in the mountains of Sinai, silver from the Taurus mines in Asia Minor, gold and ivory from Somaliland in East Africa and from Nubia on the Nile, purple dyes from the Phoenician cities on the coast of Canaan, incense and rare spices from South Arabia, the magnificent linens which came from the Egyptian looms, and the wonderful vases from the island of Crete. Literature and learning were flourishing. In Egypt, the first novels and secular poetry were making their appearance. Mesopotamia was experiencing a renaissance. Philologists in Akkad, the great kingdom of the lower Euphrates, were compiling the first grammar and the first bilingual dictionary. The story of Gilgamesh and the old Sumerian legends of creation and flood were being woven into epics of dramatic power in the Akkadian tongue, which was the language of the world. Egyptian doctors were producing their medicines in accordance with textbook methods from herbal compounds, which had proved their work. Their surgeons were no strangers to anatomical science. The mathematicians of the Nile, by empirical means, reached the conclusion about the sides of a triangle, which 1,500 years later Pythagoras in Greece embodied in the theorem which bears his name. Mesopotamian engineers were solving the problem of square measurement by trial and error. Astronomers, admittedly with an eye solely on astrological prediction, were making their calculations based on accurate observations of the course of the planets. Peace and prosperity must have reigned in this world of Nile, Euphrates, and Tigris, for we have never yet discovered an inscription dating from this period which records any large-scale warlike activities. Then, suddenly, from the heart of this great Fertile Crescent, from the sandy sterile wastes of the Arabian desert, whose shores are lashed by the waters of the Indian Ocean, there burst in violent assaults on the north, on the northwest, on Mesopotamia, Syria, and Palestine, a horde of nomadic tribes of Semitic stock. In endless waves, these Amorites, Westerners as their name implies, surged against the kingdoms of the Fertile Crescent. The empire of the kings of Sumer and Akkad collapsed in 1960 BC under their irresistible attack. The Amorites founded a number of states and dynasties. One of them was eventually to become supreme, the first dynasty of Babylon, which was the great center power from 1830 to 1530 BC. Its king was the famous Hammurabi. Meantime, one of these tribes of Semitic nomads was designed to be of fateful significance for millions upon millions throughout the world up to the present day. It was a little group, perhaps only a family, as unknown and unimportant as a tiny grain of sand in a desert storm. The family of Abraham, forefather of the patriarchs. Chapter 2. Of the Chaldees. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from of the Chaldees. Genesis 11:31. And they went forth with them from of the Chaldees. Christians have been hearing these words for almost 2,000 years. A name as mysterious and legendary as the bewildering variety of names of kings and conquerors, powerful empires, temples, and golden palaces with which the Bible regales us. Nobody knew where lay. Chaldea certainly pointed to Mesopotamia. 60 years ago, no one would have guessed that the quest for the which is mentioned in the Bible, would lead to the discovery of a civilization which would take us farther into the twilight of prehistoric times than even the oldest traces of man which had been found in Egypt. Today, is a railway station about 120 miles north of Basra, near the Persian Gulf, and one of the many stops on the famous Baghdad Railway. Punctually, the train makes a halt there in the gray light of early morning, when the noise of the wheels on their northward journey has died away. The traveler who has alighted here is surrounded by the silence of the desert. His glance roams over the monotonous yellowish brown of the endless stretch of sand. He seems to be standing in the middle of an enormous flat dish, which is only intersected by the railway line. Only at one point is the shimmering expanse of desolation broken. As the rays of the rising sun grow stronger, they pick out a massive, dull red stump. It looks as if some titan had honed great notches in it. To the Bedouins, this solitary mound is an old friend. High up in its crevices, the owls make their nests. From time immemorial, the Arabs have known it and have given it the name Tel Amaquayar, Mound of Pitch. Their forefathers pitched their tents at its base. Still, as from time immemorial, it offers welcome protection from the danger of sandstorms. Still today, they feed their flocks at its base when the rain suddenly charm blades of grass out of the ground. Once upon a time, 4,000 years ago, broad fields of corn and barley swayed here. Market gardens, groves of date palms and fig trees stretched as far as the eye could see. These spacious estates could cheerfully bear comparison with Canadian wheat farms or the market gardens and fruit farms of California. The lush green fields and beds were interlaced by a system of dead straight canals and ditches, a masterpiece of irrigation. Way back in the Stone Age, experts among the natives had utilized the water of the great rivers. Skillfully and methodically, they diverted the precious moisture at the riverbanks and thereby converted desert wastes into rich and fruitful farmland. Almost hidden by forests of shady palms, the Euphrates flowed in those days past this spot. This great, life-giving river carried a heavy traffic between and the sea. At that time, the Persian Gulf cut much deeper into the estuary of the Euphrates and the Tigris. Even before the first pyramid was built on the Nile, Tel Amaquayar was towering into the blue skies. 4 mighty cubes, built one upon the other in diminishing size, rose up into a 75-foot tower of gaily colored brick. Above the black of the square foundation block, its sides, 120 feet long, shone the red and blue of the upper stages, each studded with trees. The uppermost stage provided a small plateau, on which was enthroned a holy place, shaded by a golden roof. Silence reigned over this sanctuary, where priests performed their offices at the shrine of Nanar, the moon god. The stir and noise of wealthy metropolitan one of the oldest cities of the world, hardly penetrated into it. In the year 1854, a caravan of camels and donkeys, laden with an unusual cargo of spades, picks, and surveyor's instruments, approached the lonely red mound under the leadership of the British consul in Basra. Mr. J.E. Taylor was inspired neither by a lust for adventure, nor indeed by any motive of his own. He had undertaken the journey at the instigation of the Foreign Office, which in its turn was complying with the request from the British Museum that a search should be made for ancient monuments in southern Mesopotamia, where the Euphrates and the Tigris came closest together, just before entering the Persian Gulf. Taylor had often heard in Basra about the strange great heap of stones that his expedition was now approaching. It seemed to him a suitable site to investigate. About the middle of the 19th century, all over Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Palestine investigations and excavations had started in response to a suddenly awakened desire to get a scientifically reliable picture of man's history in this part of the world. The goal of a long succession of expeditions was the Middle East. Up until then, the Bible had been the only historical source for our knowledge of that part of Asia before about 550 BC. Only the Bible had anything to say about a period of history which stretched back into the dim twilight of the past. peoples and names cropped up in the Bible about which even the Greeks and the Romans no longer knew anything. Scholars swarmed impetuously into these lands of the ancient East about the middle of last century. Nobody then knew the names that were soon to be in everyone's mouth. With astonishment, the age of progress and enlightenment heard of their finds and discoveries. What these men with infinite pains extracted from the desert sand by the great river of Mesopotamia and Egypt deserved indeed the attention of mankind. Here, for the first time, science had forced open the door into the mysterious world of the Bible. The French vice-consul in Mosul, Paul-Émile Botta, was an enthusiastic archaeologist. In 1843, he began to dig at Khorsabad on the Tigris, and from the ruins of a 4,000-year-old capital, proudly brought to light the first witness to the Bible, Sargon, the fabulous ruler of Assyria. In the year that Tartan came unto Ashdod, when Sargon, the king of Assyria, sent him, says Isaiah 21. 2 years later, a young English diplomat and excavator, A.H. Laird, uncovered Nimrod Calchu, the city which the Bible calls Calah, Genesis 10:11, and which now bears the name of the Nimrod of the Bible, a mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. Out of that land he went forth into Assyria, and builded Nineveh, Rehoboth, and Calah. Genesis 10, verses 10 and 11. Shortly after that, excavations under the direction of an English major, Henry Creswick Rawlinson, one of the foremost Assyriologists, unearthed Nineveh, the Assyrian capital with the famous library of King Ashurbanipal. This is the Nineveh whose wickedness the biblical prophets constantly denounced. Jonah 1:2. In Palestine, the American scholar Edward Robinson devoted himself in 1838 and 1852 to the reconstruction of the topography of the ancient world. From Germany, Richard Lepsius, later director of the Egyptian Museum in Berlin, recorded the monuments of the Nile area during an expedition which lasted from 1842 to 46. Just as the Frenchman Champollion had the good fortune to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphics, so Rawlinson, the discoverer of Nineveh, was, among others, successful in solving the riddle of cuneiform writing. The ancient documents were beginning to talk. Let us return to the caravan which is approaching Tel Amaquayayar. Taylor pitches his tents at the foot of the Red Mound. He had neither scientific ambitions nor previous knowledge. Where is he to begin? Where is the best spot to deploy his native diggers? The great brick mound, architectural masterpiece of a shadowy past, though it might be, conveys nothing to him. Perhaps in the heart of it lies something which might eventually be exhibited in the museum and might interest the London experts. He thinks vaguely of old statues, armor, ornaments, and even perhaps buried treasure. He takes a closer look at the curious mound. Step by step he taps at its surface. No indication of a hollow cavity within. The great edifice appears to be completely solid. 30 feet above him, the wall of the lowest block rises straight and sheer out of the sand. 2 broad stone ramps lead to the next and smaller cone above. Then above them rise the 3rd and 4th stages. Taylor clambers up and down, crawls along the edges on hands and knees in the broiling sun, finding only broken tiles. One day, bathed in sweat, he reaches the topmost platform, and a few owls fly startled from the dilapidated walls. Nothing more. However, he is not discouraged. In his efforts to get to the heart of the secrets of the mound, he makes a decision which today we can only deeply regret. He takes his labor gangs away from the base of the mound and sets them to work at the top. What had survived for centuries what had withstood sandstorm and blazing sun alike, became now the victim of tireless pickaxes. Taylor gives orders to pull down the top story. The work of destruction begins at the four corners simultaneously. Day after day, masses of bricks crash dully down the sides to the ground. After many weeks, the chattering voices on the top of the mound are suddenly hushed. The clanging and banging of the pickaxes stop abruptly. Falling over each other in their haste, a few men rush down the side of the mound and up to Taylor's tent. In their hands, they hold little bars, cylinders made of baked clay. Taylor is disappointed. He had expected more. As he carefully cleans his finds, he recognizes that the clay rolls are covered over and over with inscriptions. Cuneiform writing. He understands none of it, but he is highly delighted. The cylinders, carefully packed, are dispatched to London. The scholars on Tim's side are, however, not impressed, and small wonder. These were the years when the experts were looking to North Mesopotamia, where, under their fascinated gaze, the emergence from the hills of Nineveh and Khorsabad on the upper Tigris of the palaces and colossal reliefs of the Assyrians, as well as thousands of clay tablets and statues, was enough to put everything else in the shade. What significance compared with them had the little cylinders from Tel Amaquayar? For 2 years more, Taylor hopefully continued his search. But there were no further results from Tel Amaquayar, and the expedition was abandoned. It was 75 years later before the world learned what priceless treasures were still lying under that ancient mound. As far as the experts were concerned, Tel Amaquayar was once more forgotten, but it was by no means neglected. No sooner had Taylor left than hordes of other visitors arrived. The broken walls and above all the top tier of the mound, which Taylor's gangs had shattered, provided a welcome and inexhaustible supply of inexpensive building material for the Arabs, who over the years came from far and near and departed with as many bricks as their pack mules could carry. These bricks, fashioned by men's hands thousands of years before, still bore plainly the names of Ur-Nammu, the first great builder, and of Nabonidus, the Babylonian conqueror who restored the stage tower, which they called the ziggurat. Sandstorms, rain, wind, and the heat of the sun have all added their quota to the process of destruction. During the First World War, when British troops on the march to Baghdad in 1915 camped near this ancient structure, they found that its former appearance had been completely altered. It had become so flat due to dilapidation and theft in the intervening years since 1854 that one of the soldiers was able to indulge in a piece of daredevilry. The step formation of the tower, which had previously been so clearly marked, had disappeared so completely that he was able to ride his mule right to the summit of the mound. By a lucky chance, there was an expert among the officers of the party, R. Campbell Thompson, of the intelligence staff of the army in Mesopotamia. In peacetime, he had been an assistant in the British Museum. Thompson rummaged with an expert eye through the huge heap of bricks and was shocked at the deterioration of the material. Examination of the terrain led him to suppose that there were further areas worth investigating in the neighborhood of the Tel, ruins of settlements which lay buried under the sand. Thompson recorded all this with great care and sent an urgent message to London. This prompted them to blow the dust off the insignificant-looking little clay cylinders which had almost been forgotten, and to look at them again with greater attention. The inscriptions on them were then found to contain some extremely important information, as well as a curious story. Almost 2,500 years before Taylor, someone else had been searching and rummaging on the same spot with the same concern. Nabonidus, king of Babylon in the 6th century BC, venerator of the past, man of renown, ruler of a mighty kingdom, and archaeologist, rolled into one. In his day, he established that the ziggurat was now old, but his tactics were different from Thales. I restored this ziggurat to its former state with mortar and baked bricks. When the weakened structure of the stage tower had been restored, he had caused the name of the first builder which he had discovered to be cut out on these little clay cylinders. His name, as the Babylonian had been able to decipher from a damaged inscription, had been King Ur-Nammu. Ur-Nammu was the builder of the great stage tower, king of the Ur, that the Bible mentions. Was he the ruler of Ur of the Chaldees? It seemed highly probable. The same biblical name had cropped up several times since then. Ancient records, which had been recovered from other sites in Mesopotamia, also mentioned Ur. It appeared from these cuneiform writings that it was the capital city of the great Sumerian people. At once the battered remnants of Tel Amakwa aroused eager interest.